Good news, everybody. We are at the end of Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper. Holmes has only one more thing to do before he puts the clues together and identifies the killer. The last thing Holmes has to do is talk to Joseph Levy. Joseph saw the culprit on the night of the double murder. Holmes has spent about an hour trying to track him down, and now he has Joseph's address.
Here I am in Middlesex Street. Let's find number 36.
So without any further ado, let's go to Joseph's house and talk to him. He is right here on the other side of the street, opposite of 33. There we go, number 36. Let's talk to Mr. Levy.
Hello, sir. What do you want?
Hello, Ma'am. I would like to speak with Mr. Levy. Do you know if he's in?
I am Mrs. Levy, his wife. He's not arrived yet.
Do you know when he'll be in?
Oh, no idea. You know, he works at the butcher's and helps at the slaughterhouse. It often happens that he doesn't come in until early morning and then leaves right away.
Well, listen, as soon as your husband Joseph returns, tell him that...
My husband isn't called Joseph.
You aren't the wife of Joseph Levy?
No, of course not. I'm the wife of Jacob Levy. Mr. Levy used to live here with his parents, but he moved.
Mommy, who's the man that you are talking to?
But this poor child has syphilis. He carries the mark on his face.
Leave us, children. Go back inside with your brothers and sisters.
Yes, Mother.
As I was saying, Mr. Levy doesn't live here. He works in a butcher's near Aldgate, but I don't know exactly where. But if you find him, he will surely live next door. Butchers always live near their work.
Could you possibly give him a message on my behalf?
I don't see him often, and... Well, even though we know him, we aren't on friendly terms, you see?
Is he bothering you, Mommy?
No, Simon, not at all.
That's a handsome boy you have. It's strange that he has light hair.
He takes after his father. Strong, with light hair.
Wait, he sounds familiar to me. A man of about 50 years old, very big, at least 6 feet tall, and left-handed, correct?
You are mistaken yet again. My husband is only 32 years old, no taller than 5'3", and he's right-handed.
Obviously, there are many Levys in the area. I will leave you, and I pray that you will excuse the disturbance. Perhaps we will have the pleasure of meeting again. Farewell, Ma'am.
Goodbye, sir.
So thanks to a mix-up, Holmes went to the wrong address. Or did he?
Daddy!
I must return to Baker Street. Let's go to Baker Street.
Jacob Levy was first mentioned in the previous video. He was fired from the Jewish Society. Well, he wasn't fired in as much as they decided not to hire him because he has a criminal record.
Well, Watson, not looking so good.
Whose fault is that, Holmes? If you hadn't shown me your masterpiece in clay...
Some actions have much larger repercussions than would be assumed at first glance. Listen, Watson, in a few minutes I will leave Baker Street in order to meet Jack the Ripper and put an end to his crimes. Beforehand, I want to go over all our discoveries to assure myself that everything is clear.
Jack the Ripper? You know the identity of Jack the Ripper?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Watson, and I assure you that we are in possession of all the elements required to determine who Jack the Ripper is. Would you like to do this work with me?
Sure, let's stare at the wall for a few seconds.
Well, we are still missing certain information in order to finish this investigation, Watson.
So we have a very large deduction board. We did deduction boards earlier on in the game, but here is the largest one by far. It is a 5-part deduction board. So, most of the board is already filled out. Look, like, most of the board's pretty much filled out. So, yeah, I kind of wish we got to do the entire thing from scratch. But that's okay. Let's put these two things on the board. So the blue one goes there, and the yellow one goes there. And let's make a deduction here. So, Annie Chapman and Catherine Eddowes both had things in their hands when they were killed. We deduce that Jack the Ripper was distracting them. Here's another deduction. So the Whitechapel killer proceeded in the same way. Yes, that's our deduction here. So from that, we're deducing that the same person killed Penny and Annie, because the killer did the same thing with both of them. And the killer did the same thing with both Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes. Therefore, we're saying, hey, the same person killed both of those people. So we put all this together. We put all this together and realize that Jack the Ripper is very strong. That wasn't much of a deduction. Okay, so we're going to put all of that together and deduce that Jack the Ripper killed everyone. The same person killed all 4 of the victims. Well, all 5 of the victims. We didn't spend a lot of time investigating MJ Kelly, did we? We didn't do like a crime scene investigation for her like we did for the first 4 victims. So we're going to put these 2 clues here, and let's make some deductions. All of this information goes together for 1 deduction. There's only 1 deduction on this screen? Oh, come on. You could give me a more difficult puzzle than that. Well, it's one of these 3 options. We are going to deduce that the killer is a scientist, the killer has lots of knives, or the killer is a butcher. The correct option is number 3. The killer is a butcher. All right. We've got more deductions here on page number 3. So let's see. The lungs were cut, her organs were removed, and with this other victim, her organs were removed as well. So we are going to deduce that the killer wanted to verify the health of the victims. Let's look at these other 3 things. So an organ was removed, an organ was removed, an organ was removed. We are deducing that Jack removed organs whenever he could. That was a really simple deduction page too, huh? Okay, let's put some clues on the board here. So the murderer searched Annie Chapman and Catherine Eddowes, meaning the murderer was looking for something. I guess that makes sense. But he stole worthless rings from Annie. What's our deduction? He stole the rings even though they're worthless. Well, we're concluding that Jack the Ripper... We're not concluding he collects trophies? No, we're concluding he's poor. I guess that makes sense. I think it makes more sense to say, well, he stole her rings because he collects trophies, not he stole her rings because he's poor and needs all the money he can get. Okay, so the wounds on Catherine's neck reveals that the murderer is right-handed. That leads to the deduction that Jack is right-handed. All of these victims were killed by right-handed people, except for Penny Nichols. It wasn't quite sure whether her killer was right-handed or left-handed. But if they were all killed by the same person, and 3 of them were definitely killed by a right-handed man, then the 4th one must have been killed by a right-handed man as well. Now let's put these together for the final page of deductions. So syphilis deforms faces. The culprit deliberately disfigured MJ Kelly, and the culprit tried to cut up Catherine Eddowes so she would look like she had syphilis. Our conclusion is that Jack was purposely trying to make his victims look like they suffered from syphilis. Our conclusion from that is that Jack the Ripper has a personal connection to syphilis. Most likely, he has syphilis. He's angry about the fact that he has syphilis, and so he's trying to punish women for it. So, our final deduction here. Catherine's apron was found in Golston Street. There was graffiti accusing the Jews in Golston Street. Clearly, Jack the Ripper is trying to frame the Jewish community. He has some reason to dislike them.
Perfect, Watson. Let's determine who Jack the Ripper is, Watson.
All right. One final puzzle. We have our suspect board right over here, and we have all those clues about the killer. Let's see which suspect matches the clues.
Thus, we have 5 suspects. Let's add the elements that correspond to each of them.
So I do want to complain about how this is set up, because I didn't know some of these characters were suspects. Like Mr. Hardiman, I thought he was just a sad, poor old man. I didn't know he was actually supposed to be a suspect the whole time. Same with Walter Sickert. He seemed like a creepy guy, but we haven't seen him for like 5 hours. All he did was lie about having his cane stolen. And Abraham Solomonovich, he was a really nice guy too. Like, he did not come across as a suspect at all. Oh. And then Dr. Tumblety, well, yeah, he was definitely a suspect. He was harvesting organs. But the only thing that he matches with is the fact that he has great physical strength. Oh, and they're all right-handed. We know that. They're all right-handed. Okay, so Dr. Tumblety has great physical strength. And that's it. He doesn't match any of the other clues we have about Jack the Ripper. So therefore, Dr. Tumblety must be innocent. Walter matches absolutely none of the clues. He's not strong. He has no worksman clothes. He doesn't live in Wardgate. He doesn't have anything to do with the Jewish community. He's not a butcher. This is the only thing that makes Walter a suspect. He's right-handed. Can you believe that? I think they could have done a much better job of building Walter into a suspect in this game. It's almost like they had no idea who the 5th suspect should be, so they picked Walter's name out of a hat and threw him on the suspect board at the last second. Okay, so let's just go through this clue by clue. Who has a score to settle with the Jewish community? Well, Jacob does, because they refused to hire him as a butcher. And obviously, Abraham is Jewish, so he's involved with the Jewish community. I don't think he has a score to settle with them, though. I think he's a proud, upstanding member of his community. So, possessing great force. Well, Jacob does. Jacob does. But not Mr. Hardiman and not Mr. Solomonovich. He takes care of pets. I think his friend, his cousin the cobbler, probably does have great strength, but not Abraham. So, workman clothes. Who has workman clothes? Well, Mr. Hardiman does. We know he's a workman. Jacob has workman's clothes. And Mr. Solomonovich? No, he does not have workman clothes. Let's put that clue back. Okay, Jack the Ripper lives near Aldgate. Well, Mr. Hardiman does not live near Aldgate. Does Abraham live near Aldgate? No. The only suspect who lives near Aldgate is Jacob Levy. Okay, murderer is 5'3". The only person who's 5'3" is Jacob Levy. He's the only one. Murderer has light-colored hair and a mustache. He's the only suspect with light-colored hair and a mustache. Wow, it's really looking like Jacob's guilty here. Jacob, that man who we saw him about 10 minutes ago. That was our first time seeing him. We only saw him because we arrived at his house by mistake. We had the wrong address. Okay, so syphilis. How many of these characters had syphilis? Well, Hardiman had syphilis, yes. He passed it on to his wife and child, as did Jacob Levy. And finally, poor. Hardiman is poor. Jacob Levy, also poor. Solomonovich, poor. Oh, sorry, the final thing is butcher. Who is a butcher? Well, Hardiman, yes, and Levy. Am I wrong about that? Is Abraham also a butcher? I guess Abraham is also a butcher. I didn't know that. Alright, so which of our 5 suspects is Jacob Levy? Well, quite obviously, it's that guy we met by accident 10 minutes ago.
And there you go, Watson. Jacob Levy, Jack the Ripper.
Fantastic, Holmes. And terrifying. But some aspects of this case are still unclear, at least for me.
For example, Watson?
Why does the man only kill prostitutes?
The man kills prostitutes because he blames them for the misery of his life. He must have frequented them assiduously, and, during these nocturnal visits, he contracted syphilis, which he passed on to his spouse, and via her, at least one of his children. He is an angry man in despair following a mistake that cannot be fixed.
Why does he only kill such miserable prostitutes?
He never had the means to afford prostitutes of higher standing than Nichols, Chapman, and the others. At one point in his life he was forced to steal to make ends meet. This indiscretion cost him dearly. He was imprisoned and exiled from his community. He had frequented low-class prostitutes, thus it was they who infected him, and they who must pay.
But why did he remove the organs?
To take vengeance on his own community, which rejected him and had more success than he. He is a man who bore the burden of a sinister reputation, that of a thief and a madman, because of his internment. So he took his vengeance in the most cowardly and horrific manner imaginable. He rubbed his knife on the uterus of a sick prostitute before using it. He passed Edow's kidney off as a veal kidney.
Why did he disfigure the faces of the last two victims?
Revenge yet again, Watson. This is what you did to my child. You will suffer the same fate.
And the piece of apron and the message at Goulston Street?
The only reason to have placed the piece of apron incriminating the message and attracting attention towards himself is that the people that Levy holds responsible for his arrest live in this building. The butcher's where he committed the theft is found in Goulston Street, and the majority of the butchers who denounced him surely live close to their workplaces.
But finally, Holmes, why didn't his wife or anyone else notice anything?
His wife has many children and must be very busy. The man is a butcher, which must facilitate things when one is questioned by the police in the street and must justify the bloodstains on oneself. Furthermore, butchers often work during the night as the meat must be sold fresh each morning. His nocturnal absences were easily justifiable. Finally, he works in the butchers or slaughterhouses. Nothing could be more simple than slipping a kidney in here and using a knife soiled with human blood there.
This story is frightful, Holmes.
Indeed, Watson. Lies, infidelity, venereal disease, murder, mutilation, and finally cannibalism. A complete anthology of what humans at their most vile are capable.
Let's go at once to Whitechapel and put this madman where he can do no more harm, Holmes.
Let's, Watson.
Here we are. We're back in this area. You might remember that Holmes went to Solomonovich and asked him to get a group of about 5 really strong men to help him detain Jack the Ripper. Well, Solomonovich
I
did
do
exactly
believe we
that.
are not alone. I hope these men won't prevent us from passing.
Me? No. But you, yes, Watson. Your journey ends here tonight.
Pardon?
You are sometimes a little hot-headed. Moreover, Mr. Solomonovich has a few things to tell you. I won't be long.
You can come in, Mr. Holmes. He's waiting for you inside. Everything was organized according to your instructions. I don't know how to thank you.
Later. Dr. Watson is awaiting an explanation from you.
There is no dialogue during this scene. I mean, Holmes's mouth is moving, but we don't hear what he's saying. It's going to go on for some time. I believe Holmes asks him to reenact the murders. I'm not sure why Holmes would want to see the murders reenacted in front of him. But that's what happens. Jacob is going to mime performing the murders here. Oh, it comes with sound effects. Oh, that's gross. Oh. So, That was the first murder. We're going to see this for all 5 murders. As I said, this scene goes on for quite some time. And that's it. That's the end of the game.
Hello, Watson.
Holmes, have you the slightest idea what you are doing?
I think so, Watson.
Leaving this bloodthirsty pervert at liberty and hiding his existence from the London police? What folly!
Certainly, the police will never find their man, but with so many men deployed, this affair will indirectly have a benevolent effect on the crime in the vicinity.
But Holmes, wait! Justice hasn't been served, and we are accomplices to the fact.
Justice? But I don't serve justice, Watson. I serve truth. And, incidentally, I serve my country, and I don't think that I have ever served it better than today. Imagine if after months of terror and a murder as abominable as that of Miller's Court, we deliver to the English people a man of the Jewish faith, a journeyman and head of family as the guilty party. A man who forced members of his own people to eat human flesh. All of this contained tension would have exploded in a myriad of anti-Semitic acts which would have thrown Whitechapel into a rage of fire and blood. And this man's family, who are completely innocent and have suffered more than their lot, would have been the first in the line of sight. Should we condemn an entire people to shame and promise them 1,000 wounds because one of their members committed an unmentionable crime? Neither I nor you have the right to do so. Jacob Levy, Jack the Ripper, is now in the hands of his own people. I have complete faith in Mr. Solomovich and the members of his community who, I remind you, courageously helped us. They took great risks and acted with the most salutary discretion. And, oh yes, it is understood that you cannot chronicle this investigation. It would be best to invent a story that takes us far from London during the somber period, in pursuit of, let's see, something challenging. A ghostly dog that glows in the night.
Don't be ridiculous, Holmes. But what will happen now? The police will endure a serious setback and a real loss of credibility. And this man?
Well, a few months after the murders have ceased, the police commission, finding themselves at an impasse, will come up with a story to tell, and everyone will vow that they know the secret identity of the killer without having the right to reveal it. As for Jacob Levy, Jack the Ripper, he will be imprisoned by his own people. He will pace like a lion in its cage until the end of his days, haunted by his crimes and his insatiable vengeance, until finally the disease which drove him to kill those poor women will finish its work and make him its final victim.
The murder of Mary Jane Kelly was Jack the Ripper's last crime. On July 29th, 1891, Jacob Levy died because of syphilis. That was the year the police filed away the case for good, without explanation. For the general public, the mystery remained unsolved. Jack the Ripper's shadow roams forever in Whitechapel's alleys. That is true. Jack the Ripper is a famous unsolved mystery. We never figured out who Jack the Ripper was. It is possible, like in this game, somebody solved the mystery, but the solution was kept secret. It was covered up and not revealed to the general public. That's possible. It's also possible that the mystery could be solved someday. Maybe some new evidence will come to light after 100 years, and it will conclusively prove who is or is not Jack the Ripper. So these are the ending credits. I'm going to talk about this game in general. I didn't really like this game. I like the other Sherlock Holmes games more. This game has a lot of problems. The pacing is kind of atrocious. They threw in a lot of things which stretch out the game's length. They don't make the game better, they just make the game longer. And so we had a bunch of different fetch quests, long fetch quests, and then subplots that went nowhere. Like we had the puzzle sequence to learn about the 2 murders before Jack the Ripper got started. That ended up being completely irrelevant. We had to spend a half hour trying to get to the butcher's shop to cut those pigs' heads to learn that Jack the Ripper had a large knife. That was a complete waste of time, and I did like those segments with the body snatchers, but those were irrelevant. I think the thing which most frustrated me was the Dr. Tumblety stuff, because we spent like 3 or 4 hours trying to find Dr. Tumblety, and the entire time we could have visited him whenever we wanted to, because we knew where he lived. We knew from the very start where his house was. We could have stayed at his apartment and visited him at any time, but no, Holmes went on these really long, boring quests to figure out information he already knew. I didn't like that. I also didn't like this ending of the game where the culprit is Jacob, a character who we've never met before. Holmes meets him by total accident, and then it's the end of the game. Hey, that guy was the killer. That's really unsatisfying. It would have been more satisfying if the killer had been Dr. Tumblety or one of those other suspects. It would have made a lot more sense if it was Dr. Tumblety, actually, because that would explain why Holmes spent so much time trying to find Tumblety. Instead, Holmes spends hours trying to find Dr. Tumblety because Finley said, hey, there's this guy who, he's renting out this place. He's kind of suspicious and weird. And then Holmes spends 4 hours trying to find that guy. I did just watch Batman Gotham by Gaslight, which is Batman versus Jack the Ripper. That's basically what the story is. I think it's better than this one. One of the things the Batman story does better than this is that Batman has a few encounters with Jack the Ripper. They get into fights, and that really amps up the tension. Whereas in this game, Holmes doesn't meet the Ripper until the very end. If there had been a scene where Holmes saw the Ripper while the Ripper was running away from the crime scene and Holmes tried to chase him but couldn't stop him, that would have been very dramatic. That's another problem with this game. There's really no sense of tension. We have a very dangerous, dreadful serial killer, and Holmes is doing basically nothing. Holmes sits at his house and does nothing for weeks and weeks and weeks. He is not acting like somebody who is trying to catch a killer. Holmes acts like somebody who is barely interested in the mystery, and I feel like that hurts the game overall. Because if the characters don't care about catching Jack the Killer, why should the players care about catching Jack the Ripper? Well, I have played other games in the Sherlock Holmes series, such as Sherlock Holmes, The Devil's Daughter, and Sherlock Holmes vs. Arsène Lupin, and Sherlock Holmes, Hound of the Baskervilles. So please check out my video walkthroughs for those games, and thank you for watching me play Sherlock Holmes vs. Jack the Ripper. I hope you enjoyed seeing me play this game, even if I think it is not one of the better Sherlock Holmes games. Those other games I mentioned were better. The Lupin game was a lot better because it did have the tension. Sherlock was actually trying to solve that mystery.